Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and the IMF has issued a warning to Canadians that might contradict some of Trudeau's current plans. You might notice that I'm not in the studio today, so this is going to be a one-taker with no charts, no graphs, just information that has been going on over the past week since my last video. You might know I'm traveling, but here it goes. So the IMF has issued this warning, but just before that, Trudeau has held a press conference in Pickering on Tuesday focusing on the Cost of Living Relief Act, saying that Senate should pass the bill quickly. You might remember last week I made a video that this GST rebate that Trudeau announced quite a while ago has now passed through the House of Commons and has now moved on to the Senate. It's very likely that this is going to pass the Senate and apply for the next 6 months, a doubling of the GST tax credit. He also asked the Conservatives to pass the second cost of living bill, which is the one that's related to dental care for individuals with children 12 and under. You could get up to, I believe, $1,200 per child over the next couple of years, so around $650 per child if this passes through, but it seems the Conservatives aren't actually in favor of this bill as it stands right now. But even though the Conservatives are against this, it seems it's likely that this vote will pass because the NDP and the Liberals have been working together to get this bill put forward, and between the NDPs and the Liberals working together, well, they can pass pretty much anything that they want through the House of Commons. Now, some are saying that the bill is controversial, this dental care one, because it increases government spending at a time when inflation, as we've just seen in the US over the past couple of days, is at higher levels than we expected, especially because we've been raising interest rates. You'd expect inflation to start slowing down, but it seems that we're not really seeing that. Currently, the Bank of Canada is fighting against this inflation by raising interest rates, right, to make everybody feel a little bit less wealthy and spend a little bit less money. Now, when they're doing that, when you're spending less money, of course, that means less demand in the economy, and prices won't go up as quickly because people are buying things less. But the IMF just released this warning, this report this week that says the Canadian economy is likely to slow down significantly and potentially even enter a recession. Now, the IMF's warning to Canada is that the government needs to be very, very careful not to spend too much money, too much widespread government spending, because it could counteract what the Bank of Canada is trying to do to slow down inflation, right? If we have more government spending, more money entering the economy via government programs, well then that could mean more spending in the economy, and all the work that the Bank of Canada is doing by raising interest rates, well, it could be for naught. Now, traditionally, Chrystia Freeland and the Liberals have looked to the IMF for guidance and for validation that their policies are actually sound, but traditionally the IMF has been very in favor of the Liberal government. So it's going to be interesting now to watch, now that IMF is saying, Liberals, maybe you need to be a little bit more careful here, don't spend so much money, something that the Conservatives have been saying for quite a while. It'll be interesting to see if the Liberals and Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, will actually take heart to this warning, or if they're going to instead look at some other stats now that the IMF isn't as favorable for them. But the Trudeau and his government, they're likely to argue that this spending isn't widespread like the IMF is warning against, in that instead it's very targeted. Only the lowest income individuals will be getting this money, so therefore it's less inflationary. That's their argument. So it's likely that they'll sort of say, hey, the IMF, we're still in line with them because we're not actually contributing to widespread spending, just targeted spending. Now, meanwhile, at the very same time, Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, continues to hammer Trudeau's government for the rising cost of living that we're experiencing. Today announcing his, actually, I guess this is yesterday now, his inflation-busting shadow cabinet. Now, you might know that the Prime Minister has a cabinet, right? Different ministers and different members of Parliament that have specific duties that sort of relate to operating the government. Now, Pierre Poilievre sort of picked out all the people that he would have in those positions if he were to be Prime Minister, and they're the ones that are going to be responsible for most heavily critiquing their counterparts on the Liberal side. He calls this, again, his inflation-busting shadow cabinet. I'm not sure how much they can really do to bust inflation when none of the votes that they're going to be doing are going to have much impact as long as the NDP and the Liberals continue to work together so closely. But he did say, this is Poilievre, I am proud to announce our hardworking and strong team that will take on Trudeau and his costly coalition and their plans to continue to cripple the Canadian economy and make life more costly for Canadians. Now, Here's an interesting story I'll go over quickly, but it relates to the higher amounts of government spending, and this is something that has just been revealed over the past couple of days, is that the government of Canada actually spent $54 million creating the entire Arrive Can application. You might remember that application that sort of tracked people's border entries and their COVID vaccine status, their vaccination status. Sort of a controversial app in many people's eyes, but the Liberal government recently shut that program down amidst more concerns that this would be a long-time program, a widespread program. And again, it just came out that $54 million was spent to create this application. Now, the reason that's so controversial is because when that information came out, a Toronto tech firm held a hackathon, sort of like a competition for its employees, developers, coders, to sort of compete to build something, this hackathon, but the goal of the hackathon was to duplicate the Arrive Can application. Now, there were multiple teams within this company that were building out sort of different functioning applications, but it turned out that just in 2 days, a team of only one person built this entire Arrive Can app, a near exact replica of the one that the government spent $54 million on. So questions are raised about government spending and efficiency when you can see one developer building out a $54 million app. At least that's what the government of Canada spent on it. So a lot of things going on here. We're going to be watching over the next number of days and weeks to, one, make sure that GST, HST benefit, the sort of rebate or surplus, the doubling of that, we're going to be watching to see if that passes through the Senate. Very likely that it will. We're also going to be keeping an eye on the Bank of Canada coming up here. We're going to see if they're going to raise interest rates further. Likely they will, especially because the US saw raising inflation numbers. It beat expectations, higher inflation than was expected. So maybe we'll see another 1% hike to the Bank of Canada's interest rate, making a lot of things more expensive, but sort of battling against this inflation. We're gonna have to see if Trudeau will sort of change his course given the IMF's new information that they've released here. And we're going to keep an eye on whether or not this dental bill and the rental housing benefit, the sort of $500 top up for low income renters, if that makes it through the House of Commons. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Again, just a one taker here with all the information that I've missed out over the past week, traveling for another couple of weeks here, but I'll try to check in as much as I can to bring you these brief update videos. But with that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you next time.